A storm of invisible interference flickered across the sky, leaving pilots wondering if the clouds themselves were betraying them. What if a silent wave of disruption could cripple an entire nation's confidence without a single missile launch? The first clue emerged when a military jet carrying Spain's defense minister, Margarita Robles, crossed the thin strip of Russian territory known as Kaliningrad. The aircraft suddenly lost its usual GPS steadiness, as if an unseen hand had tugged at its compass. The disturbance occurred exactly over the exclave, a fact that raised more than a few eyebrows. Was this mere coincidence, or a calculated message from the heart of a hybrid war laboratory? Continuing the tale, the jet's destination was the Šiauliai air base in Lithuania, a key outpost of NATO's air policing shield that patrols the Baltic skies. On board were not only the minister but also relatives of soldiers stationed there and a handful of journalists, all potential targets for a subtle scare. The aircraft's encrypted military satellite link detected the GPS glitch, allowing the crew to keep the plane on course. Robles touched down unharmed, yet the episode left a lingering chill in the cabin. What did the aggressors hope to achieve by unsettling a flight that was merely passing through? The broader picture paints a disturbing pattern. Since the onset of the Ukraine conflict, dozens of similar electronic disturbances have been logged, many traced back to Kaliningrad. Baltic and Nordic states warn of a rising tide of interference affecting planes, ships, and drones. A silent barrage that reshapes the rules of engagement. As the world watches, the question hangs in the air: will these covert attacks escalate into a direct clash, or will the resilience of pilots and their old-school navigation tools keep the skies from trembling further? As the Spanish defense minister, Margarita Robles, stepped off the A330 jet in Šiauliai, a tense silence enveloped the air. Just moments prior, her flight had been subjected to a mysterious GPS disruption while soaring over Kaliningrad, a Russian exclave notorious for its shadowy tactics. Was this a mere coincidence or a deliberate provocation by Russia? Robles, unshaken but clearly aware of the stakes, swiftly addressed the media, underscoring her nation's resilience. No force will deter Spain or its allies from pursuing peace, she declared passionately. But was she merely putting on a brave face? The aircraft, laden not just with military personnel but also with family members of stationed soldiers and journalists, had escaped unscathed. But the chilling reality remained: Kaliningrad had been linked to numerous electronic interference incidents targeting aircraft since the invasion of Ukraine, with warnings pouring in from Baltic and Nordic nations about rising threats to navigation systems. Euronews reported that Robles' plane had navigated post-GPS disruption thanks to its military satellite signals. Yet, this incident casts a dark shadow over the skies. What if the next attack wasn't just a signal disruption, but something far more sinister? Experts have observed an alarming pattern of GPS tampering traced back to Russian origins. Pilots are adept at flying without GPS, but the growing number of such incidents raises critical questions about safety in European airspace. Could this be Russia's strategy to instill fear and sow chaos in the West? With official sources confirming the attempt to disrupt signals, the reality becomes even more alarming. Kaliningrad hasn't just served as a military outpost, it's now a nerve center for hybrid warfare, where psychological tactics mesh with technology to undermine the stability of NATO nations. Will these tactics escalate to more dangerous confrontations? And how long can Europe's skies remain safe amidst this intricate dance of power and provocation? In a gripping tale set against the backdrop of rising geopolitical tensions, Kaliningrad emerges as a key player in the invisible war that has erupted across Europe. This Russian exclave, sandwiched between Poland and the Baltic states, is now the nerve center for a new kind of warfare: hybrid attacks designed to undermine adversaries without ever firing a shot. The situation escalates dramatically as a Spanish defense minister finds herself entangled in this shadowy conflict. On September 24, the military jet carrying Spain's defense minister, Margarita Robles, was reportedly hit by an unusual form of attack as it soared above Kaliningrad. Instead of missiles, it was a GPS disruption, an unsettling reminder of the ongoing tension between NATO and Russia. Just moments before, everything seemed routine, until suddenly, the navigation signals faltered. Was this a mere coincidence, or a calculated move from Kaliningrad as Robles flew towards the Sialii air base in Lithuania? The stakes rise when it's revealed that Robles wasn't alone on that flight. Relatives of Spanish airmen stationed at the base were on board, those very soldiers who recently intercepted Russian aircraft over the Baltic Sea. This incident feels less like an accident and more like an act of vengeance. Robles and her passengers could have faced serious peril, yet fortunate circumstances prevailed. Spain will not be intimidated, Robles vowed in a press conference, determined to reassure her country and allies. But was she genuinely unshaken by the incident, or merely concealing her fear? Reports clarify that the aircraft, having utilized military satellite signals rather than conventional GPS, avoided any real danger. Yet, warnings of similar disturbances have reverberated across Baltic and Nordic nations, highlighting the growing risks of electronic disruptions orchestrated by Russia. But the pattern doesn't end with Robles. Just weeks earlier, a plane carrying European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen fell victim to a GPS jamming attempt, one severe enough to force the crew to navigate using paper maps. Could these calculated strikes signal something larger? Why are high-profile European leaders being targeted? As Kaliningrad steps into the spotlight for these audacious violations of airspace, one thing becomes apparent: these are not random incidents. Could these brazen acts be signals of a much heavier crisis looming in the shadows? The world watches, waiting to see if NATO's patience will wear thin or if Russia will push the envelope even further. With every disrupted flight and electronic interference, tensions are intensifying. How far will these two sides go before the situation explodes into outright confrontation? The future remains uncertain. As the tension mounts, we're left with one chilling question: what will happen when the next high-profile figure takes to the skies above Kaliningrad? Earlier we saw Kaliningrad's silent strike on Spain's defense minister's jet. Could a hidden signal really turn a high-tech aircraft into a sitting duck? The plane flew over the Russian exclave, then felt a sudden GPS flicker. It was not missiles, nor gunfire, just an invisible pulse. The jet headed to the Sialii base in Lithuania, part of NATO's air policing shield. Inside, relatives of Baltic soldiers and journalists shared the cramped cabin. Robles landed safely, declaring the attack a cowardly intimidation. But who lit the invisible fuse over the Baltic sky? What hidden hand was really pulling the strings? That story leads to an even bolder interference, this time on a European Commission aircraft. Imagine pilots forced to replace glowing screens with crinkled paper maps mid-flight. How did they survive? Sky News reported the pilot of President Ursula von der Leyen's jet was forced to unroll old-fashioned charts. Russia's jamming shut the GPS completely. The aircraft circled a Bulgarian field, then touched down after an hour of uneasy waiting. A video later showed the chaotic descent and the aftermath of the strike. Why did Russia aim this at a senior minister? The answer lies in Kaliningrad's covert grid. If the plane had crashed, NATO could have been pulled into a fresh conflict, something Moscow does not yet desire. Pilots, however, retain ancient navigation skills. Forbes noted in 2017 that aircraft can revert to pre-GPS methods. Automatic Direction Finder, or ADF, and Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Range, or VOR, still guide planes when satellites fade. These systems lose reach over oceans, reminding us that old tools still work today. So the jamming, though disruptive, does not guarantee disaster. What will be the next silent weapon in this unseen war, and can antiquated maps outsmart digital storms? The battle now rages in the ether, and the sky may never be the same again. In the heart of Europe lies a ticking time bomb, Kaliningrad. This small Russian exclave, sandwiched between Poland and the Baltic nations, has transformed into a potent weapon of hybrid warfare, especially in the wake of the Ukraine invasion. By 2025, it's not just the threat of troops or missiles that sends chills down the spine of neighboring countries, it's something far more insidious. Tensions recently escalated when Kaliningrad allegedly interfered with a military flight carrying Spain's defense minister, Margarita Robles. On September 24, as her aircraft soared above Kaliningrad, it encountered an eerie disruption of its GPS signals. Was it mere coincidence or a deliberate attack? This moment marked a new chapter in a long-standing conflict, threatening to ignite the already fraught relations between NATO and Russia. As the Spanish jet approached the Lithuanian airspace, the implications of the disturbance loomed large. Was this a calculated move against a NATO member amidst a backdrop of increasing hostility? Fortunately, Robles and her fellow passengers emerged unscathed, relying on military satellite signals to guide them. After landing, she stood resolutely against Russia's intimidation, declaring the strength of Spain's resolve to safeguard peace in Europe. However, beneath this surface calm lies a web of deceit and tension. Kaliningrad has been linked to a surge of similar GPS disruptions, with reports indicating dozens of such incidents since Russia's military actions intensified. The fear spreads beyond just one flight. Baltic and Nordic nations have voiced concerns about rising electronic interference endangering civilian and military airliners alike. Why target the Spanish flight specifically? Details emerged that passengers included families of Spanish airmen stationed in Lithuania to counter Russian aggressions, potentially fueling the motivation for retaliation. With NATO poised on a knife's edge, Robles' flight wasn't just an isolated incident. It symbolized the precariousness of peace in Europe. This incident recalls a previous alarming event when a plane carrying European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen fell victim to similar GPS jamming. In that case, the pilot had to revert to basic navigation, highlighting the vulnerabilities inherent in air travel today. As the mechanical sounds of the cockpit dissipated, the tension was palpable. What was Russia hoping to achieve, considering the delicate balance of power? The reality is chilling. Kaliningrad's actions mirror a broader strategy of intimidation against NATO allies. Though the pilots can maneuver without GPS, the threat of misidentification looms larger than ever. With potential implications that could lead to catastrophic misunderstandings, every GPS disruption raises serious concerns. As we ponder the implications of Russia's motives, questions linger. What is the endgame? While they may not seem intent on downing planes outright, the specter of a conflict triggered by simple intimidation tactics is a sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of those in military and civilian aviation. The stakes are indeed high, where every signal disruption could theoretically result in tragedy. The world watches, and tension mounts, as Kaliningrad becomes a focal point for European unease. A surge of secretive air defense drills now shadows Europe's eastern wall. Operation Eastern Sentry promises new missiles, radar nets, a tighter sky. Yet the mystery over Minister Robles' flight is no lone flare, it is a flash in a broader, relentless hybrid campaign spilling across the continent. Why does Russia keep poking the NATO beast? The odds swell that another episode will surface soon, each one a fresh blade in Putin's toolbox of fear, cajoling, and stark warning. If Robles' resolve rings true, the threats will crack no armor. Still, Moscow pushes them, perhaps just to stir chaos where calm once reigned. A chilling coincidence lingers, her jet's GPS tremor unfolded directly above the Kaliningrad enclave. This suggests the exclave has become a launchpad for covert electronic assaults, turning it into a perilous spear aimed at NATO allies. The pattern runs deeper than September's flare UPS. In January 2024, analysts traced a GPS wobble that crippled Finnish aircraft over the Baltic to the same Russian outpost. Open-source sleuth Marcus Johnson plotted the anomalies, and a single hotspot, Kaliningrad, stood out like a dark star on his maps. Months later, the BBC linked a cascade of GPS glitches across the Black, Baltic, and Mediterranean seas to Russian activity. Though the enclave doesn't own every disruption, it serves as the primary Baltic hub for such maneuvers. One vivid fallout, Finnair halted flights to Estonia's Tartu for a month, the airport's entire navigation relying on GPS, now a fragile tether. What will the next pulse look like? Will the skies finally crack under this invisible war? Or will pilots learn to navigate the darkness with nothing but instinct and paper charts? The answer waits in the silent, humming corridors of Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad, an isolated Russian enclave bordered by Poland and the Baltic states, has increasingly emerged as a focal point for regional tension. With the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, this small territory has transformed from a mere geographical curiosity into a potent instrument of intimidation, expertly wielded by Russia. The unsettling truth? The true danger of Kaliningrad isn't just troops or weapons, it's the insidious tactics of hybrid warfare. In 2025, as tensions simmered, Kaliningrad found its notorious reputation amplified when it launched a digital assault against Spain's defense minister, Margarita Robles. Imagine the scene: mid-flight, Robles aboard her military aircraft is suddenly enveloped by a troubling GPS disruption as she crosses over Kaliningrad's airspace. This wasn't a missile or anti-aircraft fire, it was something stealthier, more unsettling, and far more alarming. Reports from September 24 collected by Euronews revealed the chilling details. As the Spanish jet glided towards its destination, the Sialiai air base in Lithuania, what seemed like a harmless GPS glitch painted a far more ominous picture. This minor disruption wasn't just bad luck, it came suspiciously while the aircraft was flying directly over Kaliningrad, which has been linked to numerous similar incidents since the onset of the Ukraine invasion. And it didn't stop there. Robles' flight was not the only one in jeopardy. Alongside her were family members of soldiers stationed at the airbase and journalists, all potential collateral in Russia's calculated game of intimidation. Yet, as the plane landed safely, Robles addressed the media, her voice steady but striking: "No one will break the resolve of Spain or its allies." But was her composure solely a facade? Behind closed doors, doubts must have lingered about how close they came to disaster. Interestingly, experts cited that Robles' aircraft was equipped with military-grade satellite systems, rendering it untroubled by the GPS interference. Yet, as tensions escalate, the concern remains. This incident mirrors a troubling pattern. A debate swirls around Kaliningrad's role as a central node in a network designed to undermine NATO's air integrity. With each reported incident, the numbers rise: over 100 cases of GPS disturbances experienced by pilots each month, leading to alarming revelations about the frequency of such jamming signals originating from Kaliningrad and the nearby St. Petersburg area. Historical incidents involving even high-ranking officials like former UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps only deepen the mystery. What's truly disturbing is the notion that Russia seems to be flinging a wide net, targeting NATO aircraft more generally amidst its political machinations. Each flight near Kaliningrad becomes a gamble, a risk that those in charge are keenly aware of, hoping to ensnare key European decision-makers in their disruptive web of hybrid warfare. So why does Kaliningrad persist as a thorn in NATO's side? The enclave may house covert bases entrenched in a strategy of destabilization, each jamming signal a fingerprint of Russia's intent to provoke or intimidate. As tension escalates, how much longer will these provocations remain unchecked? And what consequences might they hold for Europe at large? The shadows of Kaliningrad stretch far, an ominous sign of the geopolitical chess game unfolding in plain sight, with each critical move poised to ripple through the fabric of international relations. A tiny strip of land, wedged between Poland and the Baltic states, is silently turning the sky into a battlefield. Imagine a faint, high-frequency hum that buzzes through the air, invisible waves that twist the compass needles of every aircraft that flies overhead. Could a hidden base in that enclave be weaponizing the very signals that guide pilots home, turning navigation into a nightmare? The answer may be far more disturbing than anyone imagined. In the opening scene, a brief flashback pulls us to a restless night in a cramped control room, where the glow of monitors painted the walls amber, and the scent of stale coffee mingled with the metallic tang of circuitry. Intelligence reports whispered that Kaliningrad, Russia's exclave, has become a hub for a new kind of warfare, one that strikes without missiles, using only electronic interference. The story now shifts to a startling revelation: secret facilities have been built specifically to destabilize Europe, and one of them has been identified by a reliable source. A chilling question hangs in the air: how deep does this electronic web go, and who is pulling the strings? The answer comes from a cache of classified documents obtained by Estonia's Delfi news outlet. The papers point to a small town called Pioneersk, where a covert installation operates as part of Russia's broader Tobol electronic warfare network. This site doesn't just jam GPS, it reaches for Galileo, GLONASS, and even Elon Musk's Starlink satellites, weaving a digital net that ensnares any signal crossing its domain. The European Union's delegation to Ukraine has catalogued the threat, naming 9 individuals and 6 entities responsible for destabilizing actions across Ukraine and the EU. At the top of that list sits Kaliningrad, home to the 841st Separate Electronic Warfare Center, overseen by 2 senior military officers. The center's primary focus is the Baltic region, where its jamming and spoofing campaigns have become a daily nuisance for civilian and military navigation alike. Why does this matter? Because the legal gray zone in which these attacks occur leaves NATO and its allies with little more than sharp words. As the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace explained in a November 2024 analysis, Russia's hybrid tactics sit below the threshold of armed conflict, making a robust response almost impossible. The result is a silent, persistent pressure that chips away at European security, one disrupted flight at a time. The final twist lingers like the echo of a distant siren. If a GPS disruption can force a high-level minister's aircraft to veer off course, what might happen when the interference is more than a nuisance? The story ends on a breath-held pause, leaving the audience to wonder whether the next target will be a ship, a drone, or something far more catastrophic, waiting just beyond the horizon. Previously we learned that the GPS interference fell beneath the legal line that defines open warfare, leaving NATO with only condemnations and empty threats. Why does a silent signal scramble feel more dangerous than a missile launch? The answer hides in the power of plausible deniability. What if the real battlefield is invisible, and the next move could shatter that fragile calm? Now the focus turns to Russia's secret playbook. The strategy thrives on ambiguity, allowing Moscow to deny every accusation while the chaos spreads. Each time the news breaks, the Russian voice remains mute, and the world watches a storm of electronic whispers. Kaliningrad stands as the nerve center, a fortified hub where jamming devices ping and pulse like a hidden heart, ready to strike again. The enclave fuels intimidation, masking long-term designs that could outlast the Ukraine conflict. Intelligence whispers of a broader plan, a preparation for direct clash with NATO. If Moscow finally claims victory in Ukraine, will Kaliningrad become the launchpad for an even larger confrontation? And what hidden mechanism could tip the balance before anyone sees it coming? The unfolding drama in Europe is more intense than anyone imagined. Picture this, in the shadowy exclave of Kaliningrad, Russia isn't just flexing military muscle, it's executing a sinister game of intimidation. This isn't about firing missiles but manipulating technology to sow fear. As tensions rise between NATO and Russia, a shocking incident involving Spanish Defense Minister Margarita Robles sheds light on a new front in the ongoing hybrid warfare. On a seemingly average day in late September, as Robles traveled to Lithuania, the aircraft she occupied encountered a mysterious GPS disruption over Kaliningrad. Imagine the quiet hum of engines suddenly punctuated by the eerie uncertainty of flickering navigation systems. The defense minister had no idea she was flying into a digital battlefield. This covert tactic, aimed not only at her but also at the very heart of NATO solidarity, sparked outrage and reflection. Robles's mission was crucial, aimed at fortifying European airspace against Russian aggression. As she bravely addressed reporters upon landing, her words carried the weight of countless nations. They will not break our will. Though she faced this challenge head-on, the specter of what could have transpired loomed large. Were these mere games of power, or was there something darker at play? As investigations unveiled that this wasn't an isolated phishing attack but part of a grander scheme, alarm bells sounded across Europe. Reports of Russian drones breach Polish airspace and MiG-31s harassing Estonia heightened the stakes. Sounds of alarmed dispatches crackled over radio frequencies. Metal grinding against metal as NATO fighters scrambled in response. The tension reached a tipping point, countries rallied in preparation, calling for consultations under NATO's Article 4 in light of these brazen incursions. But amidst this chaos lies an unsettling question: was Robles's aircraft targeted solely by chance, or was it a calculated move to intimidate Spain? The circumstances tied back to the disturbing trend of escalated hybrid attacks, leaving nations quaking in fear as Russia sought to display its unwavering aerial presence. Kaliningrad stood as a dire reminder of the looming threat, catapulting Europe into a state of anxiety. But here's where the plot thickens. Just weeks earlier, a similar incident had targeted European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's flight. The tragedy of the GPS jamming had forced her pilot to scavenge for paper maps to land safely after losing all electronic navigation. This was a stark revelation. Russia was not merely playing games but sending a chilling message about how thin the line could be between political maneuvering and outright aggression. So, what is Russia's endgame here? Is it just about rattling cages or creating the perfect storm for a broader confrontation? While the fear of a tragic mishap lingers in the air, discerning minds must question the long-term implications for European unity. With each disruption, the cautionary tales of missteps only grow more prominent. In a new era where digital warfare intertwines with real-life stakes, how will Europe respond? What happens when the creeping shadows over Kaliningrad meet the determined resolve of a united NATO? Each twist and turn brings us closer to an unavoidable climax in this political saga. Is there a way to outmaneuver the escalating threats, or will Europe find itself ensnared in a conflict neither side truly desires? The answers rest on the tenuous balance between power, technology, and diplomatic finesse. The stakes have never been higher, a silent storm brews, and only time will unveil how this dramatic tale unfolds. The tension in Europe is reaching a boiling point as a chilling narrative unfolds in the shadowy enclave of Kaliningrad. This isn't just a display of military might, it's a clever play of technological intimidation. Instead of missiles, Russia is utilizing a more insidious form of hybrid warfare, and a recent incident involving Spanish Defense Minister Margarita Robles reveals just how precarious the situation has become. On an ordinary day in late September, while en route to Lithuania, Robles's aircraft experienced an alarming GPS disruption as it flew over Kaliningrad. Imagine the serenity of the flight shattered by unsettling sounds, navigation systems flickering and malfunctioning, engendering a sense of disorientation. Unknown to Robles, she was navigating not just the skies, but the treacherous waters of modern geopolitical conflict. This covert maneuver wasn't merely an act of harassment, it was a direct challenge to NATO unity, striking at the heart of collective security. Upon landing, Robles was resolute in her commitment, asserting boldly, "They will not break our will." Yet, the shadow of uncertainty loomed over her as she contemplated the potential consequences of this digital ambush. Was this an arbitrary act, or were deeper, more sinister motives at play? Investigations revealed that this incident was not isolated. Similar occurrences had surged since Russia's aggression in Ukraine, causing alarm throughout Europe. Reports have emerged of Russian drones breaching Polish airspace and fighter jets harassing flights over the Baltic states. The crackling sounds of urgent military communications filled the airwaves as NATO scrambled its forces to respond. It became evident that countries were on high alert, invoking NATO's Article 4 amid these aggressive incursions, seeking unity against a perceived threat. But was Robles's aircraft targeted randomly, or was this a calculated move aimed at intimidating Spain directly? The specter of Russia's hybrid tactics intensified, as each incident left nations more on edge. Kaliningrad transformed into a symbol of increasing unease in Europe. And the plot thickened further. Just weeks prior, a similar GPS jamming incident had endangered the flight of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. In that case, the disruption was so severe that pilots had to revert to using old-fashioned paper maps to navigate safely. This stark reality illuminated a terrifying truth: Russia's maneuvers were not mere games, but a pointed message regarding the fragile balance between political posturing and overt aggression. What is Russia's ultimate objective? Is it merely about instilling fear, or is it constructing a tempest that could lead to something far more violent? The possibility of a tragic accident looms large, prompting critical reflections on the long-term consequences for European alliances. As disruptions continue, the lessons of previous encounters grow ever more salient. In an era where cyber warfare converges with the instinct for survival, how will Europe respond? What will happen when the growing threats from Kaliningrad collide with NATO's resolve? Each twist in this narrative propels us closer to an inevitable climax. Can Europe deftly navigate these escalating tensions, or will nations find themselves ensnared in a conflict neither side truly seeks? The answers hinge on an unstable mixture of power dynamics, the advancements of modern technology, and the delicate art of diplomacy. The stakes have never been higher, an ominous storm brews on the horizon, and only time will reveal the destiny of this gripping saga.